It's bad. It's bad.
We actually got
sorry. Sorry, I'm gonna go ahead and hop off. Matt, I've made you host and it's recording, so just whenever y'all are done, y'all can just exit the meeting. So
okay.
Thank you, Lindsay.
No problem. Y'all have a great day. Call me if you need anything.
Okay. Looks like she's made everybody co-host too. So let's see. Yeah. So everybody should be able to share their screen if they need to do that.
Okay.
Mark, you needed to go first, right?
Is that all right, John? Do you have any, or Bryce? I need to step out right at 7:30 this morning. I think we'll probably be close to being wrapped up anyway, but.
That's fine.
Bob, I'll let you host it this morning. I'll make sure everybody gets their stuff shared and all that stuff.
Sounds good. I'm gonna jump off just a second and get me a cup of coffee.
Okay.
Bryce, you're with Texas Corn Producers?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been with them for 3 years tomorrow.
Okay, all right, good. And obviously based in out of the Lubbock office?
Yes, sir.
Are you from that area originally, or?
I am. Yes, sir. I grew up in the west side of Lubbock, but my family, I'm actually from a ranching family, but we ranched and are still ranch in Muleshoe.
Okay, yeah.
And where the drought is arguably the worst, if you look at the drought.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Over there in that sandy land, man.
Yes, sir.
Ooh.
Well, I'm originally from Dimmitt, and we farm between kind of between Dimmitt and Last Buddy.
Okay.
So kind of back over that kind of part of the Panhandle. So, yeah, know that area well.
Spent a lot of time going back and forth between those towns and all the back roads that people don't know when they get off the highways.
And yeah, if you don't know your way around, it can get a lonely feeling pretty fast for folks that feel pretty lost.
Well, you know, one time I was going to the annual cotton meeting up there and spent the night in Lubbock and drove out. It had snowed a fair amount, and I'm just not experienced to this, but I mean, it was that snow to the horizon as you're driving to Muleshoe, and it really got disorienting, you know. There's some stretches in there where there was not even fencing. I mean, just nothing.
Yeah.
And you're just driving, and it's just that white fog thing that confuses pilots, you know. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
totally disoriented. You know, see, Bobby's a resourceful guy. When he was in a native growing up, he always had blankets. You told this story, blankets and coats and things in the back of your car. But, you know, I was sitting there thinking, you know, if I have car trouble, I'm just going to die. I mean,
you're done. Yeah.
Hey, there's a bunch of people that's huddled up in the front seat of their car and somebody dug them out the next day that they was about froze to death, but it's happened a lot up there.
yeah,
Probably not as much as it used to. All these front wheel drive vehicles make it a whole lot more conducive to getting around than it did with those old big heavy vehicles with rear wheel drive that they didn't get around in the ice and snow very well. But it makes it nice now, even though we don't deal with it very often where down here. So
yeah.
Have y'all had a little rain, Bobby?
yes, we have.
Yeah.
We're damp. I mean, we got about 4 inches a month ago and maybe 3 weeks ago. And then we got another ½ inch on Saturday, and it just kind of kept everything damp. We're just now starting to see any kind of clover or winter type weeds pop out, though. Normally we have, you know, some green nibblings at this
Mhm.
point in time, but they're just now starting to peek out of the ground.
What about field work? Are you behind or?
Oh, I think everybody's, except for fertilizing, everybody was holding off on fertilizing because they didn't want to stick much fertilizer in dry dirt, but they've been at it now. So everybody's in pretty good shape.
Good.
We're still about 15 inches behind normal for the year though. So it's
Yeah.
been dry. It's been dry here. I mean, it doesn't show like it does in North Texas, but it's been really dry.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we were blessed with some, but we stayed dry so long, we got behind. I was actually going to plant a little bit of wheat down here, and it just so dry so long. And then I'm going to replant in the spring with some grass, so it's just going to have to sit there and look bare for a while.
Dust farm, right? So they're doing up north.
Normally you plant oats, but I tell you what, I've had so much trouble with rust on oats that I've about decided that it's not worth it down here anymore unless you're got the time to get your fungicides and stuff out on a regular basis. But just throwing oats in the ground and thinking they're going to last till March, it doesn't happen. I haven't gotten it to work like that anyway. So Bryce, y'all been hard at it?
We have been. We've changed over a lot from. I'm used to going down to all of the farm shows and crop tours and stuff, and Zoom has consumed our lives.
Yes. I think everybody's got Zoom poisoning.
Yes, sir. Actually, we'll have 3 Zooms back to back this morning from this and preparing for our annual meeting and a committee meeting. So we're staying busy and in contact, but I prefer the face-to-face stuff.
You bet.
Well, the state planning that's going on in February, is it still rocking along to plan?
So far, I've heard that Angie and Tiffany seem pretty confident in the stuff that was going to happen after Christmas, that it'll take off. And so I know that Angie is just like me. For those of y'all that know Angie, she's also itching to get out of the office and go out and not be stuck here. So
Looks like a good program.
they worked on that for I mean the whole calendar year now, and even a little bit of last year and stuff. And so they've jam-packed it full of all the right stuff. I'm interested to go to one and not just be editing the papers. I want to actually read what they're doing.
Yeah. No, it looks good. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Coming up on 7, Bob.
Yeah, I'm sitting there waiting to see the 00.
When I've got a separate screen running here when I get my slide presentation up, let me know if y'all can't see it if I save the wrong screen. But
Well, go ahead and stick it. Go ahead and
Go
stick
ahead.
it up.
okay, let's see if it'll do it.
Yes, sir.
And we go from the
There we go.
beginning. We'll see that map of China and the guy in the dirt.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
All right, good.
Okay, Bob, it is in fact recording. So whenever you're ready to go.
Well, like I said, that's a long minute, but I guess we're close enough to the end to see the double. There it is. So we'll get started right at 7 o'clock this morning. And good morning to everyone. Greatly appreciate you being here this morning. It's always a pleasure to be a part of this update on the 3rd Wednesday of every month. And again, we want to thank our sponsors, the Texas Corn Board, our Texas Corn Producers Board, the Texas Grain Sorghum Board, and the Cotton Board for sponsoring this event. And they've been with us now. I guess this is our 7th time to have this. And again, we greatly appreciate their being a part of this. And welcome Bryce White this morning. He's going to be our guest a little later. He's with the Texas Corn Producers Board, and we'll hear from him in a little bit. But I guess now we'll turn it over to Dr. Mark Welch, and he's going to give us a little update on the grain side of this program. So take it away, Dr. Welch.
All right. Thank you much, Bobby and Matt. Again, appreciate y'all putting this program together and giving us this opportunity to check in along. I think this is basically the same information I did last month of the main drivers that are going on in the corn market right now, or the grain markets generally, or the influence certainly of China with the export activity that we're seeing to that part of the world. And then as we look ahead to 2021, I think the influence of weather and potentially drought, especially early in the season, are some major factors that could shape the market outlook as we move forward. We've seen the December corn futures contract has continued to show some strength coming out of the lows back in late August, that rallying up to about $4 there in October, and we kind of take another leg higher as we've gotten into November here and early December. And again, I think we'll talk about a few of the factors that are offering a degree of support to these futures prices as we're starting to head now into the 2021 marketing year and our growing season. The other feature of our market is the continued premium that we're seeing for grain sorghum in our cash grain prices. That chart tracks that the relationship between sorghum and corn prices, and this is paid to farmers on a national level. This goes back to 1989, and the average over that period of time is sorghum at a discount of 17 cents per bushel to the price of corn. And of course, you can see what's happening then in the last year or so. We've had that significant premium for grain sorghum. And the last month reported here was back in October, and that premium to sorghum was up to 86 cents a bushel. So a very strong price relationship for sorghum relative to the price of corn. When USDA came out with their WASDE updates last week, they made no changes to 2021 for corn supply and demand. These numbers are all the same numbers we had back in November, but notice the relatively strong or tight carryover to use, that stocks to use ratio at 11.5%, and the $4 season average farm price. Those are both the strongest levels in those two measures we've seen since 2013. The tightest stocks and the highest season average farm price since that particular marketing year. And so certainly a relatively tight situation for corn heading into 2021. And something else interesting going on, and I think Dr. Robinson has shared this slide with the cotton market, demonstrating where are the positions of speculative traders in our futures markets. The black line indicates the tracking the nearby futures price, and this would be the corn market. And then when we see these trader positions above zero, those are bets for higher prices, they're net long. Below zero, those are bets for lower prices, being net short the market. And this group of traders were at record net short positions back in June, July, and then now we've gone to near record net long positions in the corn market in a very short period of time. And if nothing else, I think maybe an analogy would be we're really stretching the rubber band both ways. If market conditions were to change, I think we could see a significant changing position from this group, and certainly we could see some dramatic price adjustments as well. But I think it's important to keep an eye on the positions of these groups and to recognize that we're about as long the corn market as we have seen. This goes back to 2003. And of course, the export market is the primary driver of what's going on across the grain markets. When we look at corn and grain sorghum, comparing last marketing year, 1920, to the current marketing year, 2021, you first glance at that chart, and there's not a lot of difference, but you do see that difference in China. They have gotten a bigger piece of the pie, and many of those export sales have gone to the U.S. But I think there's something else that's very important to note. Look at the size of the pie. So we have generally more competition out there. The world trade of corn has expanded considerably. China's taking up most of that. But if you look at these other corn importers as well, there's 10 million metric tons right there. And that in excess of what China has been doing in the corn market. So the world trade has certainly accelerated, and the expectations for that to continue in 2021. And I think what's particularly striking about that is that as the coronavirus and the pandemic really took hold and spread around the world, our first inclination was all these things were going to pull back. These markets were going to get smaller. And yet what we're finding as we're working through time and through this marketing year, that actually these trading opportunities are expanding. And they're creating opportunities in for exporters, and that means the U.S. Again, the pie is getting bigger, and the U.S. making a much larger portion of that relative to some of our export competition. And to give you a little, maybe a little better picture of what's happening in South America and then Ukraine and Russia, which you see being smaller numbers here. Brazil, a little bit bigger in terms of their export presence in the current marketing year. Argentina back a little bit. This looks at those major export competitors. We do expect larger corn export supplies coming out of South America in this current marketing year. Brazil is expected to have a larger crop, but that export crop really doesn't get planted until March. That's when we really change our focus to the export potential from Brazilian corn. Argentina, they're in the La Nina situation just like we are, and that tends to damper production prospects for their wheat and grains. Ukraine's got a smaller crop. Russia, no larger than they were last year. And so certainly that's limiting that expansion of export opportunity in the short term. Certainly with higher prices down the road, there's more potential for increased competition for corn relative to grain sorghum. We'll talk about that here as we move ahead. USDA did make a few changes to the supply and demand sheet for grain sorghum. They carry over to use stayed exactly the same. That's pretty tight, 8%, the pretty small number. But what they did, they raised exports but cut domestic use. So left total use unchanged, but recognizing the increased export potential, and that is the presence of China. Here's China's imports in 1920 marketing year, and here in 2021, you can see that that significant change that we're seeing when it comes to China in the market. The other participants in that market, really not much change about where they are. But when we talk about grain sorghum and world trade, we're talking about China, and we're talking about the U.S. If you're going to import grain sorghum, we've got a little competition. They'll grow some sorghum in Australia, a little bit in Argentina. But of course, the U.S. is the dominant world exporter of grain sorghum. So when we look at increased export opportunities, we're talking about potential for U.S. producers. And that export potential is what drives that spread between sorghum and corn prices. This is that difference, sorghum minus corn. And when that number is increasing, the premium is either decreasing, the discount is decreasing, or the premium is increasing, tends to be associated with these years of very strong exports. And that's kind of the era that we're in right now. This is where we are at current exports as of to date. This is where we're expected to be by the end of the marketing year. So with that strong rebound that we saw last year, up around that 7 million metric tons, and that's what's driving that premium that we're seeing in grain sorghum right now, particularly given the relatively tight stocks that we've seen in U.S. grain sorghum. And I think the real question then of market support for many of these markets looking ahead will be, what are we going to do with acres? That'll be the first kind of arguing point besides the South American production, is what are U.S. farmers going to do? And as we can see, the last couple of years, we've had some very severe planting conditions, especially in the northern plains. And we've had a significant shortfall just getting our crops in the ground. Back in 2011, 12, 13, we were planting some 250 million acres of these major grain crops and cotton. And I think with the price incentives that we're seeing in the markets now, that unless there is a weather issue, we'll get back to that 250 million acres. So we've got 12 million acres of slack that we're going to try to plant something. And so I think the markets will be positioning this winter. All of these markets need to buy some acres. And so it'll be interesting to see who wins that battle as that planting decision is made. If you look at just the battle between corn and soybeans right now, that price ratio of the November soybean contract and December corn is about 2.56, 2.57, 2.58, right around that range over the last several months. That's a very strong soybean to corn price. When we've seen that over the last several years, the actual the plantings that we get out of that price relationship, soybeans and corn are about equal. And so if that were to play out for 2021, we usually plant about 180 million acres of those two crops. Well, if we're planting around 90 million acres of each, 90 million acres of corn, that's not an increase over the 2020 crop. That would be about the same size. That would mean all those extra acres, that 8 million acres, would come from soybeans. And so I think that's one of the factors that's giving support to that December corn contract. As we're looking ahead, that if we just plant that 90 million in the current demand and use projections, we're going to be leveraging very heavily for a strong yield. And could we get a record yield in 2021? Absolutely. 180 bushels per acre, kind of the number that gets thrown out there, maybe as an early projection, possible. But with the La Nina influence and any other kind of weather factor, something less than an all-time record high yield, 90 million acres is going to be tight. And I think that provides significant support for the corn market moving forward. We are in this La Nina weather pattern. When again, those temperatures out in the Pacific are 0.5 degrees Celsius below normal. We're kind of in that bottoming out range. It's kind of a moderate La Nina at this point. Early projections had this thing bottoming out about 1.6 or 1.7. And now the latest projection is about 1.3. So not maybe as severe as we first thought. And we are expected to get out of this by early summer, late spring, which for South Texas producers means your crop's about in and done by the time we finally break free from this thing. But it would perhaps provide some relief for the rest of the Texas sorghum and grain production, particularly then moving north up into Kansas. So it might get some relief for grain crops later in the summer, but it could be a tough winter and early spring. So just to kind of recap, I think where I'm looking at these markets right now, if I look at the corn and sorghum, what I think the balance sheet changes might be as we move forward, I think we will see an increase in acres for both. Yield effects, of course, corn in the corn belt is less likely to have a direct impact from the La Nina weather phenomenon, but there tends to be some, and it tends to take the top end off the yields. So if we hold our yields about steady for corn, I do think with maybe some tougher production conditions in Texas, we could see the national average for sorghum, maybe the yield come down compared to last year. And I do think we will have a larger corn crop. Sorghum, maybe not, even with the higher acres. It'll depend on the acres to go with that yield expectation. Domestic use, I don't look for too many changes there. Exports, I think we'll see perhaps increasing competition for corn. These high prices are going to give incentive for lots of people to grow corn. And so if conditions allow, I think we'll have increased export competition there. Sorghum, we really don't have that many competitors. And so I think if we hold exports steady when it comes to grain sorghum, we could see higher stocks for corn slightly, and perhaps a little tighter stock situation for grain sorghum. If we do raise exports, it'll come out of domestic use. And so we've got a little room to give. Our price outlook, I am looking for something a little lower for prices for corn in 2021. I think these are some good pricing opportunities right now. Start to get something done in your marketing plan. When it comes to grain sorghum, my price outlook primarily is the relationship to the corn market. And I think we could see some of that premium decrease when it comes relative to corn, but not much. As long as we see China continue to stay in the market like they are, I think we'll continue to see the premium for grain sorghum relative to the price of corn. But again, much of this depends on how this La Nina weather plays out this winter and early spring. Certainly the pace of growth and recovery in the global economy will play a role in this as well. And with the emphasis on trade and exports, any disputes, disruptions, uncertainty, policy issues around trade, I think are critical to support our ag markets going into 2021 and renewed focus on the export potential. That's all I brought this morning. I'd be glad to take any comments or questions. I'll hang around for as much as I can here this morning if something does come up a little bit in the chat. But appreciate the time to be with everybody this morning. And please reach out, holler if we can provide additional information or maybe help talk about some marketing issues and opportunities and marketing plans as we go forward. Thank you much.
Great information, Dr. Welch. Again, we greatly appreciate you being with us this morning, and as usual, a good presentation. At this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. John Robinson, and he'll give us this cotton market update. Take it away.
Okay, hopefully y'all can see that. So a lot of things you just heard about the grain markets are gonna fit right with what I'm talking about with regards to cotton. We had, unlike the grains, USDA made some rather dramatic changes to the balance sheet. They were long awaited. I think they were kind of baked into the market, to the market price reaction anyway. They tightened up things in the world month over month, cutting production in various places. But the biggest source of the drop in world production, you can actually see that over here, 3 million bales fewer, 2.5 almost million bales fewer. Half of that was from a huge cut in production in the United States, which, you know, people had been expecting. People were expecting it in the October WASDE. They didn't get it. They were expecting it in the November WASDE. They didn't get it. USDA didn't do anything to the numbers in those reports. And so, you know, it was kind of like, hey, it's now or never. You know, people have been pointing to how bad we had, I don't know how many tropical storms hit the Gulf Coast, and we had dry weather in Kansas, Oklahoma, Northwest Texas, dry weather to start with. We had early freeze, we had hailstorms, ice storms. Anyway, they've had their effect. They cut 900,000 bales out of Texas, and so that left this number a lot lower. That was expected, as I say. Then there was an unexpected adjustment. Usually when there's less production, usually our exports are lower because there's just fewer bales to export. And that wasn't the case this time. They cut production a large amount, and over 1.14 million bales. They raised exports. So, and that was due to just the recent pace that we've seen, and maybe expectations of economic recovery coming. So between cutting production and raising utilization, we had a very large downward adjustment in ending stocks month over month. We dropped from a very bearish 7.2 million bales down to 5.7. Okay. That kind of month over month adjustment is bullish. But like I say, most of it was already baked into the market. We've had a positive price reaction, a couple cents worth in old crop futures. The March 21 contracts trading at probably at 74 something right now as I speak. There's some people that think it ought to be at 7, that it ought to just be marching on up towards 80 because of how long they've been waiting for that to happen. But like I say, having those expectations already baked in, I think we've probably seen much of the price reaction that we're going to get from the old crop side. I think there's this cut right here is going to affect the new crop balance sheet and price potential somewhat more. Here's just here's a picture of those U.S. numbers a little bit closer up. Again, we focus on the ending stocks number. That's what changed a lot month over month, and that's what's got our attention now. You know, in terms of old crops, I said we may have gotten out of it what we're going to get out of it. That's not quite true. The hedge funds are still long the way they are in corn. They're long in cotton, and they if they have a reason to buy it up a little more, they're perfectly capable of pushing the market 2 cents, 2+ cents higher. That effect kind of comes and goes, not necessarily long lasting, but there could be room for kind of another little couple cents run in the old crop numbers. I think that's possible. I would say to anybody who's got unsold bales, from 2020, I would view all this as a selling opportunity. I wouldn't be holding on, waiting for vindication and waiting for the market to march on up towards 80. I would get things done. If it goes to 76, great, sell some more and sell some more at 77 by all means. The other thing I want to say is if it does march up to 76 or 77 cents, I think the mills will probably stop buying because their most recent behavior shows that they'll step in and buy the market on a dip down to like 71 or 72. We saw that here in the last week. We had prices drop from where they were trading around almost at 74 something down to 72 something. And then in response to that, the textile mills stepped in and bought the last export sales numbers were really high. That was just a pure economic response to cheaper prices. So that kind of tells me that demand is hanging around this level and the market's trading around that level. We'll probably continue, the old crop numbers will continue in a nice, fairly narrow 3-4 cent range, probably well into the spring. That's what I'm expecting. That's really all I'm expecting from the old crop situation. But the biggest implication of the tightening of these numbers and of the tightening of that number is that that's going to carry in to the new crop balance sheet. It's going to make things a lot tighter because now we're dealing with tighter supplies plus the effect of El Nino on production. So let's just kind of look at the new crop situation and I'll wind up. I'm still expecting around 13 million acres of cotton planted, and that's based on the price relationships with corn. This is acres planted historically. These are different years. There's 2019, there's 2018. There's what we planted in 2020. I think we're going to be back up here because the price of corn futures, if you look at December 21 corn in relation to December 21 cotton, that ratio is 5.8 or so. And that would put us historically right in this level of upper 12 to 13 million planted. So I think that's what's going to happen. I'll add, the drier it gets in Texas, we'll have more acres planted just as probably as an insurance response. That tends to happen historically when it's dry. Folks plant more cotton in Texas, and it doesn't mean it's going to come out of the ground, but we'll just have to see. But there may be more plantings. Here's the current situation, and it looks ugly. It's extraordinary drought over here, and this is what it is now. So if we have an El Nino that's going to give us drier than normal weather that lasts until May, that's dryness on top of dryness. And so I think we're set up for a really tough picture, particularly for dry land. I understand y'all have a little bit of moisture in the ground, and I'm glad to hear that. And I hope you can bank that all the way to planting time and catch a few rains and get through this. But for the western part of the state, it looks pretty tough. So my assumptions for a balance sheet for the new crop situation, I'm expecting higher than average abandonment. That is, we'll lose almost a third of what we plant. That doesn't maybe look to you like a lower average yield, but it is when you figure in all the yields in the Mid-South and the Southeast and all the irrigated that survives in the Southwestern region. So I'm plugging in those numbers with 13 million acres. And if I do that, I come out with something around 16 million bales. We're carrying in 5.7 from the current marketing year. And if we use 18 of that, that leaves us ending stocks around 4, which, going from over 7 to almost 6 to 4 point something is pretty good. That's a drop in stocks to use from 33% to 29%. And statistically, that would suggest that the December 21 futures at harvest time in the month of October should be trading maybe 3 cents higher than the previous year. The previous year, they were trading around 70 in October. So that suggests that harvest time futures prices might be around 73 or so. That's just sort of the statistical projection. Another thing we can use for projection is the average of December cotton futures in years like we're in, which is a season following a La Nina winter. And in those particular years, which I've listed down here at the bottom, we've tended to see a rise in December futures across the spring, and then a big reset, presumably because the market knows how much was planted and knows how much emerged, and then a little bit of volatility around the August and September supply and demand reports. That's a normal looking pattern anyway. But again, this is the pattern of prices just in these kinds of winters when there's a lot of uncertainty about how the crop is doing, and a lot of uncertainty about, how many bolls and bales are out there. So, extrapolating, if we're starting right now, the December 21 today is trading at 70, 73, 70 something, a little under 74. So, that gives us room. We could see December futures in the mid 70s. We could see December futures in the upper 70s. Will it last till the end of the year? No. So that suggests you need to do some kind of forward pricing or hedging or something to capture what may be the likely highs earlier in the year. And there's my contact info. If somebody's got a question, I'd be happy to tackle it now, or you can certainly call or email me later.
Well, I'm not showing any questions in the chat. So again, thank you, Dr. Robinson. A very good presentation and good information, and thanks again for being with us this morning. So next up, we have Bryce White. He is the Texas Corn Producers Board Production Relations Director, and we welcome him this morning and look forward to listening to his update. So Bryce, I'll send it your way.
All right, thank you. So I saw what David had said the last two times. He'd updated y'all on some of the local market opportunities that we had heard about, and some about our aflatoxin mitigation stuff that we've done. And so I was going to kind of expand a little bit on some of those things that he had briefly mentioned in there, and let y'all know about what we've been doing from the checkoff board. We actually met this week with our research committee to go over proposals that we'll do for 2021. And Charles Ring, who's a local in your area, is the chairman of that committee. And we'll take those to our board meeting in January and get those approved and announce them sometime next month. We're also, we actually have two guys from your area, Charles Ring and Jim Shugaric, are on our association board. And tomorrow will be our first and hopefully only virtual annual meeting for the association. And so members of Texas Corn Producers Association, active members, are eligible to register for that. We have our information online on texascorn.org. And if anybody has any questions about that, I'd love to answer those and tell you more about our association meeting. Last time, I know David mentioned our Young Leaders Program land. We had planned on hosting that in Fort Worth in January, but obviously as the pandemic has continued, that became a little high risk for us to do. And so we went ahead and pulled the program for this year, and we're going to wait until September of 2021. And hopefully by then the world's back to normal. I think everybody feels the same way on that. And then there's two things that we've done from more of a consumer relations perspective that I have found pretty interesting. Texas Corn, we host from the checkoff board, we host the Common Ground program. It is a really neat program with female farmers that do consumer relations. And something that they have done new this last over the last month is they've been hosting a virtual cooking show, basically, where these farmers are showing how they prepare for Thanksgiving or Christmas in their kitchen. They talk food safety, but more importantly, they talk about what happens on the farm. And that has been really interesting. They're able to reach out to a different audience than we normally do, and help shed light on what really happens on farms, and kind of give a different perspective of what people assume farming is and what big ag is. They're able to actually show what family farms are, and how they've been misconstrued. Another neat opportunity we've had is our education program. I've spoken about this. It's been, it had been for years getting prepared, and we finally, right when the pandemic hit, it started to come out. But we have Hannah Dast as our education director here, and she's done a great job. It's been rolling out all over the state. Lots of Zoom meetings, lots of virtual meetings, but we're hoping that too, once the pandemic is over, we're hoping to see more of those education meetings that'll be out regional. And so if you have any teachers in your life that want to know more about what our education program is, I believe it's kindergarten through 5th grade curriculum. Please call the office, let us know. Hannah would love to talk to you about that. And then the last thing that we really have is what I was mentioning was that we have our board meeting right at the first of the year. It'll be our first board meeting since August, and it'll be a good time for us to kind of plan out what our next steps are for this upcoming year. We do have researched some of those other programs, but the things that we've been used to doing in person that we're doing on Zoom, it'll help us kind of regroup and figure out where all we'll be able to go and what's going to be safest for us, safest for our farmers, but how we're going to be able to keep making these connections. And that pretty much wraps up the report I have. But thank you, Bobby, and all of y'all for having us on again. We appreciate the opportunity and love getting to see familiar faces again.
Thank you, Bryce, for getting up with us this morning and being a part of our program. Our sponsors and the Texas Corn Producers Board, Texas Sorghum Producers Board, and the Cotton Board are very instrumental in helping us get this program out. And we've had quite a few views and stuff over the course of time off of YouTube of these programs. So the information's getting out there, and we're just greatly appreciated that you got up with us this morning and gave us an update. So as far as I know, there's really nothing else on the docket. So again, thank you for being with us this morning, and hope to see you next month. Thank you, Dr. Robinson, Dr. Welch, Mr. Boucher, Matt Boucher, co-host there from Victoria County. We'll sign off now.
Thank you, Bob.
See you later.